ask for what you want. That's what got me into the world of tech. I sent a cold email to an AI startup CEO, and he took a bet on me. So, but it took hundreds of emails. So, just ask for it, and eventually an open door might be up your jar.
Hello, my name is Jared Molton. I lead the Udacity Consumer business, and welcome to the How I Broke Into Tech podcast series. Today, we're here with Gus Trigos, who's the co-founder and CEO of Mentum, an AI-driven platform backed by Gradient Ventures and Y Combinator. But his journey into AI was anything but traditional, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, Gus is on a mission to reshape how industries approach strategic sourcing, proving that with the right mindset and grit, unconventional paths can lead to groundbreaking innovation and fulfilling careers in tech. Thanks a ton, Gus, for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jared. Thanks very much.
I'd love to start by just learning a little bit more about yourself. Can you give me your background and your story and how you ended up where you are right now, over the years?
Yeah, of course. So I'm originally from Colombia, and I grew up in different countries. My father is a mechanical engineer, and we just had to travel a lot. But
how many countries did you grow up in?
I grew up in 3, but probably 10 to 15 cities.
Whoa, amazing. I bet that type of background gave you a lot of different context that you bring into your business.
Yeah, that's right. I grew up with a lot of friends from all over the world, and that led me to learn about programs, new video games that were just coming out, in the States or other parts where I couldn't have learned from.
Where did you kind of get started with your interest in technology? Was it when you were a kid, or was it after you had already kind of graduated from high school?
Yeah, so my first approach to learning technology was I was very interested in music production. So when I was about 12 to 13, I was using technology and to produce house music. And at that point, I was getting thousands of followers in YouTube and SoundCloud. And it was just a nice way to do something, put it in the web, and getting feedback from people to see if I was doing something good or not. But what really got me into AI and tech was I started learning to code in late high school. And by freshman year in 2018, that year was a year full of presidential elections. And I was also very interested in history and diplomacy. And I was listening to speeches. At the same time, there was a lot of buzz about how politicians were using deep fakes and AI to generate fake news. So I really wanted to understand if we could use AI to see if there were any fake news, how objective were the articles or the text that was being published. So that led me to really start wanting to think about how I could start using AI.
Going back, let's talk about the house music for a second. Why house music? What was your interest there? How did you kind of set that up as this platform? It almost sounds like that was your first foray into entrepreneurship, through attaining a follower group with YouTube and social media.
Yeah, so I actually started listening to music very when I was just 10 years old. I didn't used to listen music much. And at the time, the iPhone had come out and the iPod Touch, and I downloaded an app where you could just play some sounds. And that's what got me into trying to get deeper into how can you just programmatically put sounds together and create eventually a song.
Do you remember what the name of the app was?
I think it was FL Studio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it still around for those who are listening in?
Yeah. It happened to be, of course, not in the iPod Touch, but on the computer, it happened to be the app that Avicii and a lot of the great DJs and house music producers were using. And they also started in a similar way by just like seeing it out on the web and producing since an early age.
Do you remember how many songs you produced, Gus?
Probably got to more than 70. And by the last songs, I think they were pretty decent for my age. I was already even talking to some record labels, but I just wanted to build technology and having a much bigger impact. Not to say that music creates a lot of impact, but I wanted something more scalable.
Yeah, no, makes sense. The reason I'm asking about this is I find that oftentimes when talking to entrepreneurs, as they were teenagers or, in their youth, they would have done something that kind of led to this space. Um, you know, Personally speaking, when I was a kid and a teenager, I started my own business doing magic shows around northern New Jersey, and then grew that into a more, scaled out performing business. And then, after that went on to found a couple of businesses as well along the years. And anytime you talk to an entrepreneur, I just love kind of hearing these intro stories because I find that those learnings that you get when you're, younger, you take with you and you kind of find ways to implement in whatever way, shape, or form you're in. Would love to hear your thoughts on like, is there anything from that music business that you're taking and doing in some way, shape, or form today in your current business?
Yeah, well, that taught me about self-learning. Like you can really just teach yourself anything, and you can do so if you're very passionate about it, and you start getting a certain level of obsession, and that just helps you be very disciplined and learn things really quick. And a lot of the heuristics that I gathered when I was learning music production, I used them for, learning to code, learning machine learning, AI, and now learning how to run a business, hiring and doing more things.
How did you start learning how to code?
So I just wanted to code because I was playing video games, and I will hear that if you knew how to code, you could start creating mods and potentially getting more advantage against other players. I didn't eventually get to that, of course, but I I just bought a book. It happened to be C++, which is the hardest language to learn as a first programming language. I was also learning it by reading a book, which wasn't the best approach. And I didn't learn much, but it got me into how to program and, the variables and a lot of the foundational thinking.
And was that before or after the interest that you mentioned earlier in deep fake technology and, kind of the overlap of tech and your interest in politics?
That was before.
So let's go then to the interest of in politics and the deep fake route. You recognize that there was a lot happening in that space in 2018. Sounds like you wanted to find a way to, expose truth to the world in some way, shape, or form. What did you do about it? What was kind of your next step there? How did you action on that idea?
Yeah, so the first thing was I was first reading a lot of books. I love reading, so I got a lot of books about artificial intelligence, and they were great. The problem was they were too abstract at a certain point. I wanted to make something practical, and that's what led me to watch tutorials in YouTube and just start learning Python and start learning how to train a model and all of this. And that led me during the summer after freshman year to create some open source projects. One of them I just saw recently that was cited by 2 research papers, and it was about just using natural language processing, very basic, and certainly not what you can now do with LLMs now, but how you could identify certain articles that were objective in opinion or subjective. And you could see if certain opinions were skewed to certain political inclinations or not.
So you use this open source NLP software essentially to build a model that would look at an article and determine subjectivity essentially.
Yeah, that's right. And it was just very basic heuristics. Of course, you will train a model, but just even like how many exclamation points an article will have, or grammatical rules like that will tell you to a certain extent if someone was very opinionated or not.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess grammar tells you a lot about the subjectivity nature of a article or post. Do you remember what the most outstanding article that went through your process was? Was there anything that, thinking back, you're like, that was just ridiculous?
Not not in particular, but I did learn that I mean that there's a lot of data that is just heavily opinionated, and that brings a lot of bias. But some people have very strong stances, and I guess growing up, I had that mindset that we should always seek for the truth and be objective, which I still uh, stand for it, but that's not how the world is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the way I've heard it described is truth seekers. And it's a fun way to kind of think about, what your purpose is and how you want to direct your career as well. So you kind of were already into programming. Sounds like you knew C++. You started getting into Python. You started getting into AI. Um, how did you continue to kind of self-learn so that you could go after, some more of the deeper AI questions that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, totally. So at a certain point, I already knew how to program machine learning models, how to train them. I even got a Linux computer, and I will leave it training for the whole night. But I wanted to really understand what was behind the scenes, what was happening. And again, on that truth-seeking mentality, first principles mentality, uh, started reading more technical books, math, like what are the foundational factors behind machine learning, and that led me to start thinking about how can I make that learning process more official, and that's where I found out about Udacity.
And you applied for the Udacity Bertelsmann Scholarship, right?
Yeah, I applied. So I knew from many friends here in SF that Udacity was heavily respected, but I also knew that it was uh, very expensive, and for at least at the time. And at that time, I was a student in a student visa, so I couldn't really work, and my family's financial situation wasn't the best. And the fact that Udacity had a scholarship really opened up the doors for me to start taking that learning to the next level.
I love that. After you graduated, how would you say that experience changed your career trajectory?
So in a lot of areas, but essentially after uh, taking that course and others as well, I was able to get internships in data science, and I was also eventually able to work at BlackRock's AI quantitative investment team, which was my dream job and one of the hardest jobs to get in. And it was just crazy. I was amidst PhD graduates from Ivy Leagues and Stanford and other universities, and it was just great to have that opportunity to work at such team.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about what you were doing at BlackRock, because I think there's a really fun story between that and the work you ended up eventually doing to start at Y Combinator that we'll get into in a bit. But could you tell us a little bit more about BlackRock to start?
Yeah, so I started in one of my internships, and later on, as I started working in data science, I got into quantitative finance, which is essentially using statistics and then machine learning to try to forecast, predict, or understand the movement of certain indicators with the stock market, be it interest rates, derivatives, stocks, or fixed income. In BlackRock, I was specifically focused on systematic fixed income, which is just a fancy way of saying how can you bet if something happens to the interest rate, if it goes up or it goes down, how can you take advantage of certain instruments like derivatives and swaps?
Mhm.
And there it's just a bunch of statistics, data science crunching, and machine learning to not try to predict the stock market or where the things are going, but rather pricing them.
And so from there, what was the connection between Y Combinator?
Yeah, so there, I always knew that I wanted to build something big that could impact the world through technology. That's the way that I could see it being very scalable. I had some friends and we started brainstorming about some of the biggest problems that existed at the time. And we applied to Y Combinator with an idea that was completely different to the one that we have. Weeks after I started my dream job at BlackRock, I had actually received a signing bonus. So I went from being a broke student to now having a lot of money in the bank, great salary, and just being in my dream job. And weeks after, one of the partners at Y Combinator called me on a Friday and he said, "You guys are in. You need to quit your roles and get in full time at Mentum." And it was a very tough decision, but it was straightforward for me. I knew that entrepreneurship is my path, and that's the way where I can achieve that that objective that I have. And my family and everyone told me not to quit. Certainly, there's a lot of risks on that. I had a much more guaranteed path, but I took the hard path, and it's been the best decision in hindsight.
What advice would you give to other folks who may have a great job or the job of their dreams, as you mentioned, and kind of get that entry into a program like Y Combinator and are weighing that decision?
Yeah, so the way I guess the biggest heuristic that I have and that really has helped me on taking big decisions is having an asymmetric mindset. And what that means is if you know how much you're gonna lose first, but you don't know how much you could potentially win, you most likely want to take the path where it's asymmetric, where the upside is infinite, but the downside is limited. In that case, I knew that I had a great salary. If I were to start a company, I will lose that salary. But if I were to start that company, the upside of the company generating a lot of impact in the world will have been much larger. In fact, I didn't even know because it could be infinite. And that's what led me to take that decision. So I will take that heuristic of understanding, is this decision asymmetric? Can the upside be exponential and infinite? And if it's not, then it's a simple risk return understanding. This is, I guess, something that I learned in the hedge fund world. And that's why you learn to take certain bets. And then that's why you see people taking very crazy bets, because sometimes they can go really well, but you know the limited downside. There's other ways in which the downside can actually be infinite. You don't want to take those,
Right.
and they can happen all the time as well.
Yeah, I think that's a super helpful framework and probably applies to multiple types of decisions, not, not just, based on your career development, but across your life, really. Um, let's talk about Y Combinator a bit. So you're at BlackRock. Where was the idea? How did it come about? And how did you eventually decide, hey, we're going to go ahead and submit to Y Combinator and see if this thing has legs?
Yeah, totally. So we saw a problem, and the problem was that 2% of Latin Americans were investing in the stock market compared to other countries, or continents. In the US, it was about 60%. So there was a huge gap. And we were thinking about how to solve this gap. And one of the main things was there was a lack of digital financial infrastructure in Latin America. We went on to try to build it, and it was an extremely hard first idea for a first entrepreneur to work on, especially out of college. But we were able to make it work. There were a lot of hurdles, regulation hurdles. Some regulators in certain countries didn't even know our business model, and we were not in the regulation. But the way we saw it is essentially how can we allow more people to invest in the stock market? And we took an approach where we will be building infrastructure to enable banks and other institutions to offer investments to their customers. We launched in Chile, and eventually we were able to work with some of the largest wealth managers across Brazil, Chile, and Mexico. But
Amazing.
but the market size wasn't as big as we thought, and that's what led us to pivot.
Gotcha. Before we get into the pivot, because I want to talk about that for a bit, let's talk about the Y Combinator application process. How did that go? What was easy about that? What was challenging about that? What were some of the hurdles you faced? Just kind of getting all of your pieces together to say, like, let's see if we can really get this thing going and work with a great, startup accelerator like Y.
Yeah, totally. So we first, of course, thought about the problem, and then we went out to try to validate it. So we spoke to a lot of the fintechs and banks that wanted to offer investments, but they couldn't because of the lack of infrastructure. We also spoke to some apps that were offering investments and learn about the current alternatives, what was lacking. We were able to get initial contracts with some potential customers, and we also did a partnership with a broker dealer in the US. And once we had that, that's where we started thinking this has legs. Let's apply to Y Combinator. And the process, I think applying, just the sake of applying, is great because you learn a lot about your business answering those questions. And we also had some help from some friends that went through YC that gave us some feedback. But I just think that process is just good to take, even if you're ready or not to start a company or get into an accelerator.
And you were doing that while you were still working full time, right?
Yeah.
How did you balance the two?
So, yeah, just lack of sleep and working 24/7.
You were doing that and probably self-learning more, code while you were doing it as well, I imagine.
Yeah, always. One of my objectives in every New Year resolution is like, what new course can I take, or what else can I learn new? So yeah.
I love that. What's been the most surprising lesson you learned as someone leading a startup?
Yeah, so it might. So first of all, I think that it doesn't matter the logos that you have under your resume, where you worked at, or where you went on to study, or where you come from. I think that what matters the most, and something that I've learned, is how fast someone can learn, how hungry are them for having something, or for achieving something. And of course, thinking in first principles and being integral.
I think those are all really incredible values. What are you hungry for right now?
Yeah, so my objective since an early age is I really want to impact the world in a positive way and through technology. And that's what we're building on at Mentum. So we pivoted from fintech to the world of supply chain. And we're helping teams purchase materials in a much cheaper and efficient way. And we just learned about the pain points that there's companies that are purchasing hundreds of millions, if not billions, of materials all around the world, and they do it in a very manual and inefficient approach. So that's what we're doing right now.
What would you say is your special sauce? What makes your software different and better than anything else out there?
Yeah, totally. So it's a massive problem. Supply chain is essentially an issue that needs to be solved, and an operation that needs to be done by any company that touches physical goods. Even companies like Google or Microsoft, they need to purchase things for data centers or even indirect material. And there's always been a lot of platforms out there. What gave us a great edge was starting last year and building everything from an AI first approach. Large language models now open up a great opportunity for solving a lot of the problems that you couldn't do before. So we can now read a lot of unstructured data like documents, emails, and automate a lot of the processes that would be much slower and inefficient than using a normal platform that has been out there. And it's just, you need a completely different infrastructure if you really want to make it AI first and agentic. So it's very tough for incumbents to try to create something again from scratch, or even adding the features won't add as much gain and value as how we're doing.
You just mentioned agentic. Gus, how do you think about agentic AI within your product offering, and how are you all kind of building on that capability to provide your customers with more value?
Yeah, so we're using like a team of agents. First of all, I think that you shouldn't think of agents as, or at least you shouldn't use them yet for doing something end-to-end fully autonomously, because I don't think that the technology is there. And even so, for certain use cases, there's just some mission critical aspects where you need human oversight. But what they're really good at is making end-to-end smaller tasks. And that's what we're doing them for. So we're using them for classifying documents, for identifying the right emails from the right suppliers or vendors, extracting data from quotes or from compliance documents or financial statements. And yeah, just essentially using a lot of them to do very focused, smaller tasks than having one of them that can do everything.
Makes sense. Are you building them all in-house, or are you using any open source technology?
So we use a bunch of open source technology. We're building the agentic framework in-house, but we're building on top of the foundational models, OpenAI, Anthropic, and others as well.
Great to hear. Going back a little bit, I know I mentioned the pivot, and your company started focused on making the stock market and financial markets more accessible to folks in South America. Now you're working in supply chain. The mission is so different. As somebody who kind of came into that from the perspective of, hey, here's this pain point that I really want to solve. How do you kind of reconcile that with now kind of working in supply chain? What's the overlap between the two? What about your new mission and your new purpose motivates you?
Yeah, totally. So again, it overlaps with my objective of using technology for building scalable impact around the world in a positive sense. That could have done a lot of impact in Latin America and eventually beyond. What we're doing now in supply chain, I think it's even at a much grander scale all around the world. And it is still adding a big impact. So that's kind of like the skeleton or the overlap that I see.
What would you say to aspiring entrepreneurs that become married to maybe like a more singular purpose and have a more difficult time pivoting into a software business that is just generally going to be more interesting for the world?
Yeah, I think that both schools of thoughts are okay. If you have one specific mission and you want to achieve it, and it's very very focused, go for it. That doesn't mean you always should start with the problem in mind, and then you should iterate with the solutions, or how can you solve that problem, because there's always going to be multiple different angles in which you can solve them. What is really bad is when someone marries with that solution and they just want to use AI to solve this specific thing. Sometimes AI might not be the right approach. Maybe you can just do a different angle using normal SaaS or any other angles. So understanding that. And the second is, again, like asymmetric returns is what I'm doing right now, and the direction. Will it generate a lot of impact? If we were to continue, what will happen if we were to pivot? What will be the downside?
Yeah, that makes sense. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for new tech founders in the AI space?
So it might be a bit biased, but supply chain, I think it's a massive space, and I think that it's very inefficient. There's a lot of demand. There's chief procurement officers, chief supply chain officers. All of them are in the market for improving their supply chain organizations. But beyond that, just teams that are using a lot of unstructured data or documents, like teams in finance, tax, compliance, teams that are dealing with regulations. I think that's where there's a lot of potential. On another note, I'm very bullish on dev tools like Cursor or Lovable that are allowing anyone to come up with an idea and then turning it into a product in a very, very fast approach. That's what people are calling now vibe coding.
Yeah, it's rapid prototyping, right? Which is
Yeah.
really cool and, a lot more affordable than it used to be. We talked a bit about continued desire for learning and self-learning. What other habits or mindsets do you think have been key to your growth as a tech leader?
Yeah. So the first one is having a long-term view. If you want to build an enduring and sustainable business, you need to have patience and see it as not a 1 to 5 year journey, but rather a decade or beyond. And we're all humans. We want to have feedback loops and just that reward system frequently. Uh, like you want to see things happen and results happen very quick. But if you're trying to build something big, or if you're in it for the long term, you need to start putting that view in a longer term approach. The other one is just always being curious and entering a field or anywhere where you go as a student. So having an open mind, reading a lot and asking a lot of questions, and just being humble and open-minded.
Yeah, I think that's key for continued development as a human being, right? Just continue being curious, continue learning, and be open-minded when new things come up. I think too often folks get rigid in their point of view, and it makes it really difficult for them to continue growing as a human. So I buy that 100%. I noticed you had a recent LinkedIn post that explained the discrepancy in AI skills among developers. What keys do you look for when you evaluate talent for Mentum?
Yeah, so we're looking for people that can learn fast. Usually these people are already early adopters of new technology. And surprisingly enough, I spoke to a lot of people, engineers, data scientists from great companies and also smaller companies. And not a lot of people know how to build on top of LLMs. So that was very surprising. And those that are fast learners, they already try them out either as side projects, or they were the ones to volunteer on company initiatives with AI. The second thing is people that can think on first principles. So even if you don't know the answer to a question or how to solve a certain project, we like to see people that start from scratch and we can see their thought process. And if their thought process makes sense, then that tells us a lot. And lastly, I think it's very important, especially right now, but having good system design or a bird's eye view of how to build systems is going to be very important. And it's very important because coding is quickly starting to get commoditized, and it's just getting cheaper with the dev tools that I mentioned, like Cursor and Lovable. So yeah, having a good bird's eye view it goes a long way.
Going back to the early adopter probe, do you have a question that you ask to try to get at that when you're interviewing somebody?
Well, of course, we look into the resumes beforehand, but the first question that I ask is if they're using AI, ChatGPT, or any other AI that you can quickly use on the web, and the second is if they've built something on top of LLMs. Many times the engineers will say yes on using ChatGPT, but
Sure.
on the second part, they haven't called an OpenAI API or Anthropic.
Makes sense. Yeah, I certainly have used ChatGPT to check the syntax of a SQL query. So
Yeah.
guilty as charged on that one. What's one AI myth you wish people would stop believing?
So going back to the agentic topic that I spoke, people think that AI can do it all. You shouldn't see it right now as completely autonomous. We're still years away. And also the second is AI is great for many things, but not for all of them. And in certain cases, it could be even counterproductive. So not if you see a problem, you don't need to have an AI hammer and trying to solve everything with AI.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. I'm super curious as well as to where the investment landscape will go. There's certainly a lot of money going into AI today, similarly as there was a lot of money going into blockchain, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And I'm curious what will happen when, the investors say, hey, you know what, we're putting a lot of money in this space, but oftentimes, to your point, we're using a hammer for a solution that we need a saw for. And so, what's the different view of this? What's next? Looking back, what's the rookie mistake you think you made when you started Mentum?
Yeah, so especially with technical folks, and that happened, but coding the product before talking to enough users and trying to understand if you're building something that they really want. So that led us to now learn, and we first talked to a lot of users, whether if they're for an idea or for a feature, try to understand, try to get them to sign a contract before the first line of code.
That's fun. How's that going?
Yeah, so that's how we did it in the world of supply chain. It's a very complex product that we need to build, but we really held our horses before starting to build a line of code, and we signed up our first customers by signing a contract, and that's where we started then iterating the product and getting their feedback.
What I really like about that is you're really then building this customized solution for that client that you started with. And so you're not trying to kind of make your solution fit their space. You can really make it work for them.
Yeah, we always have the mindset of generalizing the product, but you do need to start somewhere, and that's where you start. Ideally, getting a diversified set of customers that can give you a general overview of how the product can work for the masses eventually.
I love that. You do some rapid fire here. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Mac or PC?
Mac.
Are you a night owl or an early bird?
Night owl.
Do you code in silence or do you do it with a killer playlist?
Mostly coding in silence.
Oh, I like it. What was the last song you listened to?
Probably jazz sung by John Coltrane.
Coltrane's the best. Do you debug code for 12 hours straight or pitch to investors all day?
Debug anytime.
Coffee or energy drinks to power through a tough day?
Colombian coffee.
There it is. First app you open in the morning?
Aura. I like to check my stats on how I slept.
How are you sleeping these days?
I think a bit better.
What's the LLM you use more than any other?
So ChatGPT, I think I'm probably using it for a lot of things, and I'm just using it a lot. But deep research is a great new feature. It's helping in every aspect.
I have one last question for you that we didn't talk about before. We both learned recently we were born on Pi Day. So we share a birthday. What's your favorite pie?
Favorite pie? Lemon pie.
Lemon pie. Okay. Good choice.
What about yours?
I would go for apple pie, I think.
Oh,
Big fan of apple pie.
too.
Pecan pie is another favorite. I think that
Well, pumpkin pie, actually.
pumpkin pie is good too. You know what? I'll take all of the pies. Just
Yeah.
everyone. I'll have one slice of each and maybe some ice cream on top. I'm here for it. How can listeners connect with you or learn more about your work?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn. You can search me as Gus Trigos, Trigos, and or GUS as well. And I'm posting weekly about stories and my thoughts on AI, supply chain, and startups. So feel free to connect there.
So it's Goose, Gus Trigos, Trigos, and that's across all of the platforms: Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, rather X.
Yeah, I'm just on LinkedIn.
Just
I'm
LinkedIn.
doing a social media detox right now.
Perfect. Just on LinkedIn. And then the last question for you, we have a lot of listeners who are interested to break into tech, but feel stuck and don't know where to start. What's your advice to them?
Yeah, so three things. The first one is just understand that anyone can learn anything. What you do need to understand is everyone has different ways and approaches of learning things. So whether that's reading books or watching videos or taking classes or all of them, then understand what works best, choose one and then go for it. The second is have a first principles mindset. That means uh, try try not to approach life by thinking in the same way as how the status quo says things are or how people have gone about it. It's useful, but if you have that original first principles mindset, it's going to take you a long way and to solve interesting problems from first-hand approach. And that also means focus on foundations. So if you want to learn machine learning or natural language processing or whatever it is, then understand that you need to have a good knowledge in statistics or linear algebra or calculus. So go tackle those first, and that's also going to get you a long way. And then third, it's like discipline. So focus on the input, and I think that the outcome will eventually take care for itself. And actually, there's a fourth one I forgot, but ask for what you want. That's what got me into the world of tech. I sent a cold email to an AI startup CEO, and he took a bet on me. So, but it took hundreds of emails. So, just ask for it, and eventually an open door might be up your dart.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's all really good advice. Going back to the first principle one, how can listeners learn more about that one? Is there a specific book or essay that you read that kind of helped you understand what that was and helped you form your point of view there?
Uh, there's probably a lot of books and content out there, but a simple exercise that you can do is if there's a problem or there's a certain concept that you want to understand before going into the web or going into a book and read about it, try to go into a whiteboard or a textbook and try to understand step by step with your own understanding, how will you go about it? And that's actually going to surprise you many of the times because you're probably going to get to the same result uh, in a much different way than what textbooks or other concepts can tell you.
Great. Last question. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that you're a voracious reader. What are you reading?
So right now, I like to read multiple books at the same time, but I do it in a smart way. So I'm doing War and Peace, which is a super long book, and it's been 2 months, and honestly, it's very long. But it's all about endurance. I'll finish it. At the same time, I'm reading AI Engineering by Chip Hoyen. If you want to learn how to think about systems in the foundational model and LLM era, it's a great book. I'm recommending it to everyone, and it's just a great book that is not long as War and Peace. And I'm also reading Working Backwards, which is a book by fellow Amazonians about the Amazon culture.
I love it. All really cool recommendations. A lot to check out there, folks. Gus, thanks a ton for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And we will talk to you soon.
Likewise, thanks very much.